So, welcome back to the 1760 sessions where we talk to founders, building systems and impact. I'm Harry from 1760. I'm joined by Matt Williams here, founder and managing director of Epiphany Professional Development, a Houston based executive coaching and leadership development firm helping senior leaders and their organizations reach heightened levels of performance. As they define it, Matt has a background that's anything but typical for a coach. He's come through HP, a successful medical technology exit, and over a decade coaching leaders at ExxonMobil, AMD, United Healthcare, and beyond. He's also spent some serious time thinking about where AI is taking the coaching and leadership development industry, and he has some views that I think are going to challenge how a lot of people in this space are thinking. Really excited to have you on, Matt. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. I look forward to the conversation.
And what did you think of the lengthy intro? Did I miss anything?
No, you nailed it pretty well.
I've been known on these podcasts to give a lengthy intro, but I would like to give the full scope, and I always like to check if I have missed anything.
Yeah,
So to kick off with, aside from being a cowboy on the weekends, you've had
yeah,
an unusual path into coaching. So HP, I've already mentioned, a medical tech company you founded and eventually then sold, and now executive coaching.
yeah.
What was the thread that kind of connected all of that?
It's an interesting question. I'd have to say the thread began with Hewlett Packard back in the day, and I'll date myself a bit, but Dave and Bill were still alive. And still had pretty significant influence on the company. But as I progressed in the organization, um, their their management leadership training that took place involved a significant component of coaching. I don't think they even called it that then, but they had a very strong coaching culture, and they invested fairly significantly in preparing their leaders to apply coaching skills. So I saw its effectiveness then. When I exited Hewlett Packard, the companies that I bought and or built going forward, we installed coaching cultures so that leadership in whatever form they were in was using that as a skill set to encourage and empower our employees. And it was one of the cornerstones of our success, I think, going forward. So as I began to or got closer to the exit on the med tech company, I hired a coach and
Yeah.
worked with them and really saw the value from the inside of having that confidant, that individual with no agenda other than my own, to sit and process issues with, get feedback from, etc. So when I left that med tech company, when I exited that, I hadn't yet decided per se on executive coaching. But I did go back. I did some graduate work in and around organizational development and coaching. I played around in the CEO roundtable space for a bit, et cetera. But all of the feedback that I got and the sense that I had from my earlier years was coaching was the place to hang my hat. And so that's was the precursor to Epiphany, I guess. And when I finally launched, I launched in
Nice.
Houston in oil and gas.
So it just sounds like you had a great time, got some great experience. HP showed you what leadership coaching could potentially offer. And then through own experiences, you realized, as you said, this is where I want to hang my hat and add value, if I'm correct.
Yeah, yeah, much much more succinctly said, Harry.
It's my job to do that. You work with high potential managers, newly promoted executives, and senior leaders facing complex challenges. What does that client look like at the moment they first call you? What's going on for them? I can imagine it's a complete array of things.
Well, it certainly can be, and that focus, if you will, while we do have conversations with those people and give consideration to it, our focus has shifted a bit. from that kind of generalized profile. I also work with an alliance of coaches. So when somebody comes to us and says they have a high potential or they have a leader that needs to develop, greater self-regulation skills or whatever, if it's not the right fit for me, then I'm able to offer them solutions from this
Nice.
alliance of coaches, where our focus has really come to that leader who the buck stops there. They've built something, they own something, they're a founder, a CEO, a division leader, etc., and they're simply frustrated because they're not getting the results they want and they don't know why. Um, that's kind of the space that I'm focused in right now,
Yeah.
Harry, because I think there's a lot going on in that space. There's an identity issue. There's often a blame issue. Leaders will look around and say everybody's messed up. What's going on? And ultimately, they tend to find out that it's them. It's not everybody else. They're the common denominator, and that's where the work begins. Is once they recognize the possibility of that.
Yeah, it's a huge space to be in. I think regardless of industry, most markets are quite volatile right now. There's a lot of competition out there. And often when things go wrong in an organization, people turn straight to leadership. And there are so many
Sure.
tools, coaches out there in order for a leadership to equip themselves. And that's probably where you step in. And I think it's even better now. It's leadership itself is thinking, right, what else is out there for us to be able to upskill ourselves? And I think it's a great space to be working in. And not only that, it's helping a lot of people push down below the leaders because they want to be able to look up to their leaders, so to speak. So
Yeah.
when we last spoke, you mentioned one of your frameworks. I think it was called ACT. Walk me through what that means in practice and why that particular framework.
Well, so what that is, that's a tool, obviously, and it's meant to supplement what we're doing, what I'm doing, because the leader that I defined a moment ago oftentimes um, doesn't know they've created the environment that creates dependency on them, right? They tend to be extraordinarily competent, intelligent leaders that, like most, just have a lot of pressure upstream and downstream, right? And because of that pressure, because of the demands, they've created an environment where there is that dependency, or people come to them for the answers in the spirit of efficiency, right? Moving quickly and moving fast. So what the ACT, or Ask, Clarify, Transfer model does is really just it's a pattern interrupt
Yeah.
tool. It encourages them to slow down a bit and ask a few questions, right? Where the tendency as they build out these divisions, companies, etc., is to answer all of the questions. Again, they become the bottleneck because they care greatly, and because there's a lot of process pressure, etc.
Yeah.
So ACT was designed in order to do that, to allow them to utilize it as a pattern interrupt, get return to better listening and asking some questions, all in an effort to move them forward through the Epiphany Leadership Method, which teaches them how to, from a mindset standpoint, et cetera, how to engage in those conversations in a fashion that encourages and engages and empowers their employees rather than being the answer man or woman.
I think one of the key things you mentioned there is just the slowing down part.
Hmm.
Uh, Most leaders are just caught in the weeds, moving at a million miles per hour with the state of the market or state of the business, and they don't actually sit down to think, right, what is going wrong? Where can I be better as a person? How can I deliver better for my employees? Is it hard in that situation to say to someone, right, you actually need to take a pause here and look at what you're doing?
Uh, I don't know that it's hard. I think most of the leaders, again, they come with some degree of internal sense that something's off and they don't know what necessarily. Had a recent conversation with a CEO here a couple of weeks ago, and in his mind, he was stepping in and helping because he cared. right? And they do care. They want their employees to be successful and organizations to be successful. But in that pattern, he was taking the burden back and being the bottleneck, simply because of the way he was injecting himself. And the leader, we confuse caring with development. You may or may not have kids, but we all care and love for our kids, right? But if we did their homework every night, they'd be idiots, right? They wouldn't be productive people. And so it's a similar scenario with employees. Is we have to instill a little bit of tough love. We have to give them
You do.
space to fail, but also space to thrive, and exceed what we believe their potential may or may not be.
Yeah. I think I wish my dad would have been around to hear that because he helped me with a lot of my homework and a lot of my and a lot of my university essays where it was late at night and I'd be calling, I knew to be working, and I'd be calling him being
Well,
like, "Dad,"
you turned out okay, right?
like I'd be like, "Dad, I kinda need help with this essay," and he'd go out in the evening and he'd learn a whole topic for me and come
Oh
back.
my goodness.
Yeah, he was a real life superman.
So
Um,
so AI is now your dad, huh?
yeah, pretty much, pretty much. Funny thing is I do call ChatGPT daddy now and then.
There you
Uh,
go. That's
um,
funny.
so there's a phrase on your website, it's heightened levels of success as they define it. And that last part kind of stands out to me, that as they define it. Why is that qualifier so important to you?
Because I think regardless, I mean, just as a human, we make assumptions, right? We evaluate something, we say, this is your problem. And in leadership coaching, I think, one of the tenets is the clients know best, right?
Yeah.
They have the information, they have the solution. Our job is to tease it out of them. So I'm not in a position to go in and say, this is your problem, as much as they are. So it's open on the front end, and that's part of the process, right? Is to hear and unpack what they believe is creating the situation that they're trying to correct before we go into assessment and analysis and feedback and all of that.
How often do you go in and work with a leader and they define their problem as one thing, but there's a whole load of other problems on a list
Oh,
somewhere?
absolutely. There's two scenarios that come up real quickly
Yeah.
with that question, and one is in coaching in all kinds of development areas. There's a phrase that says the problem they present is not the real problem, right? There's always something behind it. The other thing that I see oftentimes is I'll be called in by a senior leader to coach the people below them, when the reality is it's
They
the
need coach.
senior leader that needs needs the coaching, right? They're just responding to the environment they've created.
Okay. And after, look, you've coached probably hundreds of leaders. What
Mm.
is the single most common thing that holds a high potential executive back? Was there a pattern that you kind of see over and over again?
Um, well, yes and no. It depends upon the industry you're in, right? Where there's a lot of engineering, it's typically communication related, translating deep technical stuff into business language and communicating that upstream.
Yeah.
If it's outside of that, I'd have to say it falls to presence and confidence, just being able to carry themselves into the executive space, the board, and um, create confidence in others that they're capable of filling the role.
Okay. And is there like a process, well, maybe like a metric that you have or something internally that you have that you feel satisfied when a coaching engagement has genuinely worked? Is there something that deep down, right, this has worked, or are there certain triggers, or is it a metric?
Well, sure. And again, depending upon the organization and the individual, they respond to different kind of feedback and or metrics as to the success or failure of any engagement. We're pretty deliberate about checking along the way to see what
Yeah.
progress that we've made to very specific goals. So somebody comes in and says, I need to improve my communication. at the executive level, that really doesn't mean a whole lot. So we've got to drill down and understand specifically what it is that they feel is a barrier to them being more successful in the executive space. So, there's 360s, there's feedback from those
Yeah.
around them or them themselves. There's alignment meetings to ensure that we're progressing towards the goals they've set, etc. ROI in coaching is just tough, for the
Yeah.
business person, right? Because the metrics are all fairly subjective. But perception is reality too, right? And we find that behaviors change a lot more quickly than perceptions. So part of the objective of any coaching engagement as well is to ensure that the changes in behavior are being communicated out and perceived in a manner that suggests the person is getting better.
Yeah. And I think one of the key things there that you mentioned is probably feedback from other people around them. I
Mhm.
look, if someone else is saying that they're making my life better or they've changed in a certain way they work, then that's pretty much job done, really.
Yeah.
um, so we spoke previously about what AI is actually doing to this industry, and you've been watching AI move through the coaching and leadership development space. What are you actually seeing, and how is it different from the conversation most people in the industry are having, do you think?
Well, so it's interesting. I had a meeting with a group of coaches from this alliance. I may have
Yeah.
mentioned that earlier, to have a conversation in and around this topic, and what you tend to find about most of the small or boutique organizations that were brought up through the ICF that have been doing it for a number of years is everybody's pretty much stuck on this generalized kind of coaching approach where if you got money, we'll coach you, right?
Yeah.
If you've got, no matter what the problem is, no matter who you are in the organization, we provide leadership development, training, and coaching, and all of that. And really, the process of coaching lends itself to that because it's a bit like mental health. It's much more process oriented than it is industry specific, as it were, or issue specific for that matter. But at the same time, the market is becoming much more niche oriented, much more specific,
Yeah.
right? You're not looking for a general practitioner. You're looking for a cardiologist, right? Or a cardiovascular surgeon or whatever it is, somebody that does what they need to have done. And so the conversation that we were having is this barbell kind of impact it's having on the coaching market in that the large organizations, and this is because of AI. The impact is the large organizations, the Deloitte's, the Right Managements, the Korn Ferries. They've got a brand. They're established in their space. They're a broad consultancy offering a lot of different services, and they're okay. They've got the resources to blend AI as it meets the need in the marketplace, right? The smaller end of it, the niche boutique players, in order to survive, they've got to be much more focused on the issues and the outcomes that specific leaders are faced with, because it's in the middle, the generalist that AI is and AI applications are simply going to crush.
Yeah.
You've got the better ups, you've got different AI coaching platforms, etc that are going to fit in that space. And because of cost and breadth, right, they're going to thrive, which pushes out the generalist coach, charging $500 an hour, which means we've got to become more niche oriented. And that's what we've begun the process of doing. And it's what I see a number of other boutique kind of coaches that have the reach into higher levels of organizations becoming as well, so that we're able to direct the client to the appropriate resource if it's the middle, right, through AI applications or something else, and we're able to sustain those leaders who need help in specific situations that we have expertise in.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this earlier. I think the niche is now more important than ever because everyone, when they need anything from an executive coach through to a dentist, like you said, the cardiology example, people do research and people do a heavy amount of research. And they know if they spend a load of money, they can go to what you mentioned, like a Deloitte, McKinsey, and they can get specialist coaching. They can get They know what they're paying for, and that will result in something specialized for them. Whereas the more niche consultancies have the chance to thrive because they can really drill into a particular topic at effectively a better cost than what you're going to get with one of these big players. What does owning a niche actually mean in coaching, do you think?
Uh, I think, and this was my approach to it, Harry, was defining the ideal customer profile of someone that I wanted to work with. What were the key issues that they were faced with? What had I gone through in many regards, and had some success at overcoming or dealing with. And so that's the niche I've defined is people who leaders where they've built something, they're frustrated with the performance of it, and they just don't really know what to put their finger on. They haven't been able to define it. And oftentimes the reality is, again, as it was in my instance, it's the environment you created as the leader, not the people around you, but it's hard to see from the inside out.
Okay. And is that regardless of industry that you're focusing on, or are there specific industries that you want to
No,
target?
regardless of industry. Typically in Houston, it's healthcare and it's oil and gas, right? But
Yeah.
I do reach outside of that.
Oil, gas, and barbecues.
There you go.
um,
Yeehaw.
there's an argument to say that you maybe even need to drill further into a niche, specifically via industry. But if oil and gas is where you want to stick, then I think that's a very good idea. Um, you said to me, we spoke previously, and you said you've experimented seriously with AI in your practice.
Mhm.
Did you learn what can actually do well in coaching or leadership development context?
So one of the gaps that, and I'll say we because I'm working with another individual and an organization around this, but one of the gaps we identified was that in leadership development, as well as in coaching, one of the key components that's missing for the assimilation of skills or the change in behavior is the ability to consistently practice it um, and test your progression against it within a model that reinforces and informs, right? So one way to do that, and I'll take this as a for instance, one of the programs that we've offered over the years is manager as coach, right? So we'd go in, we do a 1 day program, we do role play, we do different scenarios, we encourage the right behaviors, et cetera, et cetera. But what was found 12 months later, if you will, and this is not just on the program we provided, it's across the board for organizations, which most have provided manager as coach kind of training for
Yeah.
their leaders, is they understood the concepts, but they weren't applying them. Right? They weren't using them because they didn't feel comfortable with them. They perhaps hadn't bought into the idea that leadership approach was effective, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what what we've begun to establish with this company that develops AI applications is a feedback tool that fits within the gap between training and application so that in real time they can practice and get feedback on their coaching on every aspect of what makes a good manager coach, right? So AI comes in, it listens to the dialogue, the conversation, the questions being asked, the posture of the person that's practicing the skills, etc., and gives them feedback across the board on that as to how well they did and what they could do differently or better to improve their coaching skills. And it's all done in a very um, um, it's done within the flow of work and in a non-threatening manner and gives them, some gamification feedback on what they're doing well at and where they could improve. And so we're seeing some impact in some of our, is it alpha testing or beta testing, right? Of how this can help um, the HR, the L&D teams at least prove or establish some ROI metrics right? Because we've trained them on this. How well are they providing it? And then we can look at what the data says around their use and progression within that particular skill set. And that's applicable across the board. Learning and development is going to find out that these gaps exist in every aspect of training, as it were, and gives them the opportunity to improve it, to get feedback around it, to prove its value to upper leadership, which has always been missing, etc.
I think one of the key benefits there is what you said around it kind of being non-intrusive, where I think if you're talking to AI, you're going to get, if I'm speaking to someone who I work with in leadership and development or someone in HR, for example, I'm going to be giving biased feedback. However, if I'm talking to AI, for example, I don't think it's going to be as biased. Is this something that you've seen potentially?
Yeah, potentially. What is interesting is in this practice mode, and what we're developing currently is specifically for healthcare. But in this practice mode, you've got to have scenarios that align with the industry that you're in, right?
Yeah.
Where AI is typically more general in nature. I mean, I've used AI for feedback on my coaching, etc., and it gives good feedback, but it's not necessarily industry specific. How to talk to a charge nurse, right, when somebody's coding to ensure that all the resources are in place.
You can build that out though. You can build
Oh yeah,
agent. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's
It's
what we're
just,
doing.
yeah, yeah. Okay, amazing.
Yeah, and
So
so
if you,
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say you go ahead, please.
Oh, so I was just going to add that we being Epiphany, had used AI as well for the same purpose, just not at the same level of depth, right? Because it was a coaching application that was really very good. We trained it on our methodology, etc., and clients were intrigued by it, curious about it, enjoyed using it, but didn't stay engaged with it. And
Okay.
I think this is the distinction, is because it was an offline talking to a computer that I can shut down whenever the questions get too hard, kind of
Yeah.
scenario, right? Whereas if it's an agent that's designed to work within the flow of work, then you're not talking necessarily to the computer. The computer's listening to and documenting the conversation and giving you the feedback. So that flow of work, and there's confidentiality things built in, obviously, especially in healthcare. But when it's done in the flow of work and has the approval of those who are using it, it can be extraordinarily powerful, because then
Okay.
you're
Well,
not playing to any audience per se.
yeah. Okay, that makes complete sense. And look, I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah.
Next evolution. So, if a senior leader was to come to you today and say, "I want to lead well in an AI first world," what is the first thing you think you would tell them?
I don't know that I'd tell them anything. I'd ask them what that means.
Okay. Instead of saying
That's,
like,
that's
"I
the
want,"
beauty. That's the beauty of coaching here. You don't have to have any answers. You just have a lot of questions.
you got to flip it back on them and get them talking. That's a good way of
I don't
thinking.
know. I think AI literacy is critical. I think we're on the front end of this whole thing, but it's moving so quickly. It's scary. And I think leaders make a lot of, as we all do, make a lot of assumptions about what AI is and whether to trust it or how to use it, etc. But there's still, the pace of change within the AI community, like with you guys, is extraordinarily rapid. The pace of change in the business world and adopting to AI outside of the technical space, I think it's much slower because they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the experience with, they don't know what the implications are across the board. So they've got to hire the right expertise. They have to have a good vision of and a tight vision of what role they want AI to play in their organization, etc.
I knew you'd have a good answer, not just another question.
Well, that's
So,
my challenge, is to keep my answers to myself.
so Epiphany has been running for over a decade with a serious enterprise client roster. What has actually grown this business, and how do new clients find you? Really?
Relationships. I mean, at the end of the day, I went into this business, Harry, from a product orientation to medical technology, and there were plenty of metrics in that space, right?
Yeah.
For marketing and for leads and obviously revenue metrics, et cetera, et cetera. In coaching, it just doesn't exist. And when I came in, I was told that 95% of business comes from referral. And I bought it. And so I developed a lot of good relationships early on, and those relationships have really kept us alive for the 15 plus years we've been in business.
Amazing.
Marketing's always important, but our clients don't tend to come through traditional marketing channels. They come through the relationships that we've built both in the executive business space as well as in the HR community. And they're the ones that tend to identify and funnel resources for consideration. So,
Okay. So, given everything you've just described about how you operate, how you've described the market, the consolidation at the top, the boutiques that survive, and general practices that will not, what is the next chapter for Epiphany?
it is to, as you asked earlier, to ensure that our niche is clearly defined and communicated,
Yeah.
because it is a shift from what people knew us for or depended on us for in the past to ensure that they're not left behind, that we leverage the alliance of coaches appropriately to create a seamless solution for those people, but to for Epiphany and for me in particular is to become laser focused on the niche that we're going to serve, and we're talking about 3 to 4 clients at any given time. So it's
Yeah.
very, very narrow, very deep, and hopefully serves them at a much higher level than the generalist coach or approach would have done so.
And are you considering any, group programs, corporate workshops, maybe a licensed methodology or speaking opportunities?
Right now, our emphasis, if you will, is on podcasts, on article creation and credibility and speaking,
Okay.
to various audiences, whether that's business or HR.
Amazing. And look, I want to finish on one last question. With no constraints, so that's budget, time, team, whatever it may be, what is the next thing that you, Matt Williams, would build?
Um, I'd build a camper that I could take to Colorado and fish, uh, and coach while I'm in the stream. How does that sound?
Sounds amazing. Fly fishing?
Huh? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, good, good. Well, look, when that happens, let me come and join you. Uh,
Fantastic. I look forward to it.
Matt, thank you so much for your time. That was awesome. I really enjoyed talking with you. And look, I'll include a link below to Epiphany. But thank you so much for
And
coming on.
appreciate your time, Harry.
Cheers, Matt.
Take care.